Speaking on the sidelines of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group technical meeting, Minister of Public Service and Administration Inkosi Mzamo Buthelezi emphasized that a united front was needed to close the gaps and restore citizens' trust and confidence in the public service sector. One sector where public confidence has waned is law enforcement, where corruption is perceived as a culture, particularly among traffic officials. Independent crime and policing researcher David Bruce joins us to expand the conversation. A very good evening to you, David. Thank you so much for your time. This is a gathering which was described as, corruption continues to undermine global integrity, robbing South Africa of its resources. But as we look at the working group and some of the discussions that were part of the focal areas, what stood out for you?
Well, from the perspective that I'm engaging with this issue, the critical issues in South Africa, or at least one of the critical issues, because to a very large degree, what we've tended to focus on is, for instance, the issue of state capture, a certain kind of high-level corruption. But one of the things that has been a consistent feature of surveys that have been conducted on research on corruption in South Africa. So Stats.SA has done 9 national victimization surveys over something close to 20 years, and in each of those surveys, one of the issues that's come up very prominently is the issue of police corruption. But over and above that, perhaps the biggest issue in 6 of the 9 surveys has been the issue of corruption in traffic law enforcement.
Yeah, and of course it comes with its varying tiers. If we have to look at the implications of traffic law enforcement and the kind of trust which is waning, and the far-reaching implications of corruption, because it weakens trust in public institutions.
Right, and particularly so in terms of the work that we're doing, we're particularly concerned to strengthen policing, to promote more effective policing in South Africa. And part of that is dealing with the issue of police corruption. But the argument that we would be making is that because, when people are talking about policing, they tend to talk about the SABC and focus on the SABC, legitimately so, because it is the biggest police organization in South Africa. But essentially, it seems that you can't really talk about addressing police corruption in South Africa if you don't also take into account corruption in traffic policing.
How large a problem is this, if we have to look at the scale and the impact of, public police officers, law enforcement officials, as we look at the issues that motorists are putting to the forefront about the many levels of corruption and the impact that they have on their day-to-day lives and perhaps even the state of the economy?
Well, to get some kind of indication of the scale of the problem, if you simply use the most recent Stats.SA data, it would indicate that in the region of 900,000 people on an annual basis in South Africa have an experience of having a bribe solicited from them by a traffic police officer. If you drill down more closely and look at particular sectors, so for instance, if you look at the minibus taxi industry, you'd probably find a much higher level of kind of exposure to, corruption-related behavior by traffic police. If you were to talk to minibus taxi drivers, and so so it isn't. This kind of behavior, the police officers involved, to some degree, focus their attention on what one could call constituencies that are more vulnerable, partly because they are more likely to be driving vehicles which aren't possibly properly registered or aren't fully roadworthy and so on. So particularly, for instance, among less affluent drivers in this country, you'd find much higher exposure to this kind of behavior. But also then you find, there's lots of accounts of traffic police or other police who set themselves up in the vicinity of drinking establishments on Friday evenings. And then, but that isn't activity orientated towards law enforcement. It's an activity that is orientated towards enriching themselves through bribes.
So as we look now to solutions aimed at cleaning up the image of law enforcement, whatever happened to the conversation around body cameras like in the US?
Well, it's, you see, I mean, for instance, it has recently been announced that body cameras are going to be introduced in South Africa at quite a small scale, and there have been experiments with the use of body cameras in South Africa in the past, but it may in fact be a mistake to see this kind of a tech type fix as the type of thing that's going to magically resolve this type of problem. If one looks at the experience that we have so far with the management and implementation of various types of technology in law enforcement in South Africa. So, for instance, the use of closed-circuit television and so on. There often are kind of basic problems with the management, maintenance, and so on of these kind of types of systems. And there's a complex technical side to do with the utilization of body cameras, and so it isn't necessarily true that the implementation of these cameras would necessarily mark an effective way of responding to this problem.
What will it take to find effective methods of dealing with this?
Well, all of these problems start, responding to them starts with a clear acknowledgement of the problem. So, and providing clear information about what is being done to address the problem, proper monitoring of, and reporting accountability around what police agencies in South Africa are doing about the problem. But what we're also arguing is that there needs to be a centralized anti-corruption agency established in order to address police corruption. And that should not only have a mandate for addressing corruption in the SAPS, but also in metro police departments and other agencies involved in traffic policing.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this conversation. Independent crime and policing researcher David Bruce.